Good morning, everyone. I hope everyone is having a wonderful morning today. I'm doing a little change up of scenery over here. I'm looking at the ocean. It's a little bit chilly right now, but you know how it is on my Wednesdays. I gotta start it off with Lori. It's the only way to do it. So if you haven't been with us today or before, my name is Sadie Uribe, and I'm the media producer for the Los Angeles Regional SBDC Network. The SBDC is a national program with over 1,000 locations across the country to helping to stimulate economic growth through business advising and development. We offer no-cost services to the local businesses through funding provided by the U.S. Small Business Administration, SBA, and from the California Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development, GoBiz. The Los Angeles Regional Small Business Development Center network serves small businesses throughout Los Angeles, Santa Barbara, and Ventura County. And what do we do? Well, we offer no-cost business advising, meaning that you can meet one-on-one via phone or Zoom to address your specific needs and challenges. And we also offer virtual training, such as this amazing show, to help and adapt and grow your business. So on that note, I am going to say, hello, Lori. How are you? What are we learning about today?
I am doing fabulous. We're going to have another wonderful session as we always do. And I want to do a shout out to everybody, just a little bit of house cleaning. If you are putting information in the chat, which we love, hopefully the chat's abled. I haven't heard anybody write anything yet, but make sure you have the drop down to everyone. Zoom is doing this thing where it's going host and panelists. I get to read your beautiful messages, but not everybody gets to see it. So make sure that if you're putting something in the chat, a hello to everybody, it is a drop down window to everyone. And Sadie, you might want to make sure that the chat is enabled because either we don't have it enabled this morning or everybody's sleeping. Nobody's chatting amongst themselves yet. I'm used to seeing a bunch of hellos from everybody, and I don't see it there. Ah, there we go. A hello from Sadie at least. Okay. Well, guys, let's get started this morning. So welcome to Small Biz Talk. We got another really fantastic show going on, and it's October. I can't believe it, but I'm just going to accept it's October. And has anybody else noticed that there's Halloween, Thanksgiving, and I'm ready for the Christmas stuff to be out in the stores? Oh my God, we're at that holiday season has begun, I guess. Financial literacy coming up. So please do jump in any of the sessions if you think it may be beneficial, which I'm sure it will. We're going to be talking a little bit about that today. And then what is your best legal structure for my company? What are the tax advantages? Hordes of confusion and things that people perceive. And like I always say, I think today in LA, the Gucci bag is LLCs. I got my little LLC. So many people setting these companies up don't really understand. They're going on the concept of, oh my God, I got to protect my personal assets. They told me on YouTube and TikTok that's true. Well, you have to really understand what that means. You have to be able to know what it's protecting you against, what it's not. Is insurance a better option? So if any of these questions are on your mind, either jump in one of these webinars or Sadie, as always, puts my information in the chat. Reach out to me, and either I or someone else will get a one-on-one through the SBDC. Upcoming shows. Yes, I changed the screen a little bit, guys. I decided I was going to put the name of the person and the topic we're discussing. That way you got a clue of what's coming next. Next week, we've got Sebastian coming on. He's been on the show before. He's part of the Access to Capital team at the SBDC. We're going to talk about funding your company, what options are available, kind of an open discussion on all the options, what's there, what's not. Then Carrie Anderson's going to come on. She's the founder of Beautiful Life Collective, and we're going to talk about bringing inspiration and joy into your company and life. Interesting background though. She was a teacher as well as a social justice attorney, and as she wrote in her explanation to me about her company, seeing a lot of pain, a lot of trauma in her company, in what she was doing, her clients, her customers, etc., her students, she finally kind of said, okay, I got to look at life differently. And so she founded this company based on her own experiences in how to find joy and inspiration amongst all the things that she was seeing on a daily basis in her work life. Once again, great show for entrepreneurs. I'm trying to always blend a little bit of inspiration, a little bit of joy in with all our technical talk and all our discussion and learning about each other's company, because I think that's the foundation for success as well. Okay, today, you ready for my words of wisdom? Oh, it still says business license from last week. Ignore that. Lori didn't update it. So we're going to talk about an interesting word today, guys. We're going to talk about the word discernment. So I thought about several things, and I'm bringing up the word discernment today. It's kind of a preview to the discussion we're going to have. But something came to my memory from many years ago, when I was in early 20s, started my first company. I remember I had an employee and I was saying, research this. We need to find out this answer. It was something I wasn't aware of. I didn't know the answer to. And she came back with one of the companies she had called and a response she got, and then a second company she had called and a response she got. And she said, okay, so you want me to call one more? And I thought it was really interesting that she said I wanted her to call one more. And I said, why? And she said to me, you always get three. I didn't even realize I always got three, but that is a general concept in that if you get one opinion, you're only getting one opinion. If you get two opinions, you've got kind of a 50-50, and you don't really know which to choose from. But if you get three, you've got opposing views, opposing opinions. Then you can use discernment to make a decision. Now, when I was that young, I knew nothing about running a company other than I'm doing it, right? And today, I also don't know a lot of what I'm being asked to answer about tax and finance and complicated situations, but I know how to have discernment, to be able to review a lot of data, a lot of literature, get comfortable with what I don't know, and see what is possibly the truth. And more important is, what is the truth for me? In the small business community, especially, but across all lanes, business and professional, personal, you name it, we have to use discernment on a daily basis. Now, what I think is interesting, and my key here is, when discernment works very well for me is when I do not have a fear or disbelief in my own ability to figure it out. When I say, I'm not good with this, I don't understand it, I can't comprehend it, I've got to go to somebody else, that's when I cannot get an awareness, an understanding, a discernment, a insight, a feel for what is best for me, because I've shut off all of the information that's coming to me. When I go, I don't know this, but other people do, I'm going to weed through everything they're going to say. I'm going to ask why they're saying this, what there is opinion in, what's it based, what's their experience, and I'm going to use my own insight, my own good judgment, my own discernment, and I'm going to figure out what works with me. That's when I get it right. So often when I meet with clients, the first thing they say to me is, I don't understand this. I'm not good with this. I'm very creative. I'm not good with this. They're already shutting it off. So here's what I'm saying to you guys. As business owners, you know more than you know. You have a general feel for more than you know. You have more insight than you believe you do. You know when things are working. You know when something's not right. You know when cash flow's not there. Give yourself credit. Give yourself the knowledge that no matter what, you can figure it out. Don't take anybody's word verbatim. Do the research, ask their opinion, ask where that information is coming from, because you're going to get varying opinions on many different subjects, and all could be right, but maybe only one is the right solution for you. So use discernment. We're going to talk more about this in just a bit, and it's going to all come together like it always does during the show, and you'll see why. That brings me to introducing our guest today. Dalia Fogenay is an accountant dedicated to empowering businesses through effective financial management. As the founder of DF Accounting Services, she has been instrumental in helping numerous clients streamline their operations, improve their financial health, and grow their businesses. With a strong commitment to ethical practices and continuous improvement, Dahlia is known for her ability to simplify complex financial concepts and tailor strategies to each client's unique needs. Dalia, welcome to the show. And I'm going to say welcome back to the show. For those of you who have been around for a while, you're one of our favorites to have on the show. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Well, I want to start out for those of you those in the audience who are not familiar with you. Tell us a little bit about your company, the background, your inspiration for starting it. Give us a walk through things that know people who know you already. We know, but the others don't. Give us a walkthrough.
Yeah, so I started my business based on just being in the accounting industry over 11 years. I was actually like a salary professional where my job was to go to company to company to develop the accounting department where there were struggles, or let's say someone was going on maternity leave and they didn't have time to train someone else to take over that position, then I would go in and kind of take over the accounting department and then train the new person that was going to be permanent in that position. After doing it for so long, one day I actually was given an invoice, and the invoice said my name. And I'm like, I'm processing the invoice in this company that I'm helping at the time. And then I realized how much they were getting paid for my services. And I remember that's when I kind of said, I can provide these services to more people without having to be tied up like at 40 hours a week in one company. I can be impacting more people at the same time. So I decided to take a leap of faith and go into business. And I've been in business ever since. And I've been impacting people in different industries, because one thing I was realizing was that a lot of people who apply for certain job positions, they only knew about the IT world. They only knew about aerospace. They only knew about that industry, where me, I knew about all these different industries. So I knew there was a high demand to be an accountant for people in all industries, because it's very unfortunate sometimes where someone's looking for someone who specializes with lawyers or with small businesses. And then when they find a tax person or a bookkeeper, they're either overwhelmed with clients, or they're not taking in no clients, or the person they meet doesn't have specialties in that area. And that's how I started.
So true. I love that story. I love it that you saw how much they were getting paid with your services and was like, no, I can do this. I can charge direct instead. I absolutely love that. I have had different careers as well, always pretty much in my own company. But during my turnaround as a CFO, I was working with companies that were somewhere 20 million on up. And so in that, by default, I was working with the larger accounting firms, the larger tax preparing firms, because that's the type of companies that you would hire at that level and that expertise, right? So
Right.
in that, although, yeah, this accounting firm was, not as good as this one was better, this one was easier to work with, they all had a certain standard of level that they provided, because they had to be insuranced and licensed. They had to do reviewed and audited financials. Not that our audience needs to fully understand what I'm saying, but in other words, they had a higher level that they had to live up to in order to do that level of work. So even though maybe one firm was better than another, they all were pretty much, I could depend on them for things I didn't know to do it right. Okay. Where am I
Right.
going with this? So working with small companies and then being around different firms, accounting firms, different tax preparers, independent tax preparers across the board. What I notice, and please, you like, today's is a discussion. So if you're like, no, Lori, I don't see it this way, you tell me I don't see it this way, right? But what I was amazed by is, I'm just going to say it point blank, the level of incompetence amongst these firms, these bookkeeping firms, accounting firms, tax preparer, that are serving the small companies who don't have a clue. So you have the
Mhm.
uneducated, unknowledgeable person receiving the services, and you have more, less of a competency across all boards, because I think you've got an individual that may be a tax preparer doing just personal tax returns, that gets a client and takes on what they really don't have a background in, right? And then
Yeah.
suddenly they're doing an S corp and they don't even understand it. So this is where it ties into the discernment. The person purchasing these services has to have even more understanding of when they're getting the right fit and when they're not. And I'm going to end it with this. I even had a fellow, it was CPA. He's, one of these people that's in his 70s, right? He's been practicing for a long time. And he surprised me, because the other day he said to me, I am just so disappointed in my industry. I am seeing people not do a W-2 reasonable wage for S corp, and he brought it up. So I thought, maybe what I'm seeing is is more prevalent than ever. So let me stop there. Is what I'm saying making any sense? Are you seeing it? Do you see where it's like kind of like a dangerous ground for our little my small companies I care about so much? It's a little bit of a landmine out there for them when hiring help.
Yes, I absolutely agree. And I love how you just gave us the example of when you spoke to the 70-year-old plus man, because that's what I'm encountering. So one thing about DF Accounting Services, we team up with other accounting firms that can't handle the overload, right? And what I see a trend on is that these accounting firms that have been around for a very long time, like through generations, those people are now retiring or they're
Yes.
trying to do an exit plan. And what's happening is that I see like a 10-year growth. A lot of people would kind of retire at 65. A lot of these CPAs or tax preparers are kind of retiring at 75 because they're noticing the lack of information that the people who is preparing the tax return, the lack of knowledge that they have. Sometimes they get a client that they have an S corp, but they never were informed to run payroll, and they're like, "Oh, I didn't know." So there's a huge thing with a lot of people who are stepping into this industry that don't really know the fundamentals someone like back in the day would do, right? Constantly be educating themselves. And I really believe it's because of social media and the amount of information that's out there, and the people that pertain to be gurus. What they don't understand is that when you educate, you got to really tell people what kind of crowd you're educating, because sometimes the amount of information you're providing is for someone who's making six figures and above, or someone who's making $1 million, where they can use that strategy of writing off a vehicle after a certain weight. Or I think what happens is people start asking for these strategies that don't even apply to them. And mainly we're dealing with a lot of small business owners, right? And a lot of times you shouldn't even be thinking about that strategy yet. You need to be knowing where your financials are. But I strongly agree with you're saying. It's a lot of that, where a lot of people are just thinking they need to get an S corp just to get an S corp, or people are starting businesses, but then they go on social media and they're thinking about doing a single member LLC, an S corp. So it's very important for you to reach out to someone who specializes in small businesses.
Oh, I'm so glad you said that. I'm going to go off on a tangent on the social media for a second, because it's so true. On a daily basis, I have constantly through the SBDC people who said, well, I set up an S corp for the tax advantage and they have no profit. So now they have all these administration fees and they don't even understand it. They are doing things that really are best under a sole prop, and they're getting an LLC. So what they're doing is they're getting their information from a TikTok or a YouTube. In fact, I was asked once by the SBDC if I would do a short that they could do for advertising. And I said, did you notice that any of the people that are doing that are not credentialed? I'm credentialed. I would not do that. I don't know the audience I'm speaking to. And the other last thing I want to say about that is I get people calling me and go, I need a tax strategy, and they don't even have profit yet because they're listening to these really creative tax strategies. And I also think, in addition to social media, I agree. Tell me what your thoughts are on this from the older generation transitioning, and then we're going to get into some details that our audience can have as takeaway. I'm kind of setting the scene. I think DIY software is to blame too. QuickBooks, although it has broad advantages, I think when it went from desktop to online and became the QuickBooks marketing way to go, it caused people to take on so many clients and treat them like, I call it herding cattle. So this is another one I want to have a discussion about. In the olden days, I'm old, in the olden days, you sat down with your tax preparer and they'd say, well, did you use your car? Did you use your office? Did you use this? What about this? And they were bringing up ways and credits and deductions that you maybe did not think of. Today, the biggest complaint I get, and we're going to go into how to get a good tax preparer, we're going to launch from this, is the tax preparer just asks them to send their QuickBooks forms, which may not be correct, right? They take the data right from their actual output without questioning, well, why is the balance sheet got negative numbers? Is there any mistakes on this? And then they send them back a tax form to sign, and they never have a conversation. So my thought is, this is kind of the way it is. I'm not seeing it change. This means, and this is where we're going to go today, the small businesses have to be empowered just enough to ask the questions and not rely on the tax preparer necessarily to ask the questions to them. Now, ideally in a perfect world, we got tax preparers and everybody's got a good one, but we know we can't make sure that everybody out there is finding a good one. So we have to be empowered to at least say, hey, I'm using my home office. Can I take that? I'm using the car. I'm using part of my cell phone. So I think the responsibility of asking some questions and just using discernment and good judgment and common sense, rather just, here you go, I trust you completely. The small businesses have to take more control and respond. I'm not talking about being an expert and do tax returns, but I'm saying have more control and ask the questions. Your thoughts?
Okay, I love everything you just said. It's so true. Like starting with social media, I remember that I kind of got into the rabbit hole of wanting to provide a lot of short videos and provide education. And then in my heart, after a while of doing it, I felt like, no, Dahlia, because every person is uniquely they're unique in their business, they're unique in their journey, they're unique in the stages that they're in. So I noticed that a lot of people who are very successful in that area, like even when people show travel hacks, well, that doesn't apply for everyone. It doesn't apply for the person that's not responsible with their credit. So I wouldn't even recommend them to do that travel hack. They're not even responsible paying their credit, like, their credit cards on time.
Right.
But so now jumping into as far as the taxes, what I noticed, and it's very unfortunate, is that I have to kind of be calling their CPA. Sometimes clients come to me for bookkeeping, and what I do is, hey, I want to work with your CPA. I'm completely okay with, because I know CPA is a very personal, or tax preparer is a personal thing. You're comfortable with that person knows your financials, they're looking at your social security, everything, right? So what I do is I introduce myself to their CPAs and let them know any bookkeeping questions, don't ask the client, ask me, because now I'm the bookkeeper, which is great because 99% of the time, the client doesn't understand accounting terms, bookkeeping terms. But what I notice, unfortunately, is that I have to constantly be reminding the tax preparer or the CPA, by the way, her vehicle is 100% deductible because she uses it or he uses it for business. I noticed that after having our one-on-one Zoom call with the client, I noticed she never had her vehicle deducted. And I have to keep reminding the tax preparer, she qualifies for this. Or after our 6-month review, I'm informing the client, can you please have a sit down with our client so you can come up with a tax strategy, because she or he is net profiting a lot. And it's very unfortunate that now as the bookkeeper, I have to kind of take on that role, right? Because the lack of, I don't know what's happening with the tax preparers of today. And it's very unfortunate, but that's why I love how we're going to dive into the steps on how to find a good tax preparer and discernment on that, because I see it time and time again where clients will tell me they'll come and start working with me, and I'm like, who's your bookkeeper? Let me reach out to your previous bookkeeper. What software? And a lot of them they just know the software their bookkeeper was using, but they didn't even receive financial statements on a monthly basis. They didn't even meet up with their bookkeeper. And then when they decide to move and transition out, their bookkeeper actually lets them know, I haven't even done your books in months. I'm behind. And that is such a horrible feeling to be in, right? Because, or the worst thing that I've seen is that the bookkeeper enrolls the client into an accounting software and they don't have full administration rights to it. So if you leave your bookkeeper, that information stays with the bookkeeper. You can't take it with you. And that is the worst thing, because now you have to deal with cleanup jobs, starting all over. And it's just not a good feeling for you. You want to have your financials from all the previous years. It doesn't matter how many times you change your bookkeeper throughout the years.
Oh my God. Okay, there is so much to unpack there. And by the way, I'm seeing the exact same things that you are seeing verbatim, exact. So we're going to now start unpacking it. So I think we've got a good, good stage. We understand what's going on. So I'm going to start by I get asked this all the time. I need I say tax preparer to give my EA credit, enrolled agents. That's why I say tax, you could say CPA, but I'm like, enrolled agents account too. So first of all, enrolled agents are tax preparers that are certified by the U.S. Treasury, the IRS. They have more testing on the tax application. CPAs are certified by state. They are tested on both accounting and tax. A lot of times they can be equivalent because like myself, I have the finance background plus the tax, but that's a quick on what EA and CPAs. But I get asked all the time through the SBDC, I need to get a good tax preparer. Do you have a referral? And part of it is through the SBDC. We'd have to give referrals on many different names, and I don't have that many names. I give referrals out, but more importantly, this is part I want you guys to hear. I want people to interview and do discernment on hiring the person themselves. I don't want them to just take a direct referral because it may not be a fit. So I'm going to tell you the answer I give people. I tell them, here is 3 interview questions I want you to ask them. You're going to laugh at this, okay? You know, it's Lori being clever. I want you to first ask them, do they do business tax returns? Now, you're going to see the person who does personal tax returns and did one Schedule C for a sole prop go, oh, yes, we do business tax returns, right? You're going to see that. So then the next question you ask them is, what percentage of your clients have a company? Okay, that is, did you do one Schedule C, or do you, if you say 90% of the clients versus 10%, a different number? And I'm going to explain why I ask these questions before I hand it to you. Then I say, of the clients that have businesses, what legal structure do they have? If you have an S Corp and you hear 1% to have a company, no. And they do only sole props. S Corps are their own animal. You got to have somebody that S Corp. And I do this, guys, because tax preparers tend to, there's no golden rule, but they tend to either focus on doing personal tax returns, and they occasionally do a Schedule C for a sole prop or an LLC, or they focus on only business tax returns and they do the personal as well. Different mindset. That's why I flush that out. That's it. That's the only intelligent wisdom I got on the table for this. So I'm going to say to you, Dalia, if somebody said, how do I interview and find a good tax preparer? Give us your wisdom on how they go about that.
I definitely let everyone know that, one, make sure that the reviews you are seeing on their Google profile, that you go through them. A lot of clients find me through Google because I'm making my mission that my clients leave me a review, right? So a lot of times I tell people, first start is, I know you were recommended to me, but I need you to find 2 other people that have great reviews on Google, because that's reviews left from their clients. And I need you to really review that and see if you can even have a conversation with them. Then the second thing, when I have a conversation with a client, I give them so much information, and I tell them, with the people that you're interviewing, the bookkeepers or the tax preparers that you're interviewing, I need you to ask them this. Are you focused on business returns? Are you focused on individual returns? And if you're not focused on business returns and you're just focused on individual returns, is there someone you can recommend me that strictly focuses on business returns, dealing with S Corps or sole props, whatever category you're on? Because 9 out of 10 in the accounting industry, we do have business partners that handle that type of line of work, right? What I'm noticing is that many tax preparers, EAs, CPAs, they start off handling individual tax returns, and then eventually they grow so much that they only take on business returns. But that's okay, because I know there's another company that strictly focuses on individual returns. So I think being able to distinguish what's your tax preparer, the person that you're kind of thinking of hiring, if that's going to be their focus and their long-term focus, because when it comes to taxes, you don't want to be jumping around either. You want to have this tax preparer that you're locked in, because what happens is, it's like me. When my clients work with me for a long time, they know that Dalia is going to think of a question ahead of time, or Dalia is already going to think of a strategy because I know their financial journey. So the same thing with your tax preparer. They know what documents to ask for. They're actually reaching out to you like, hey, it's time to submit the sales tax. It's time, we need a reasonable salary. They know your financial state of mind. So I highly recommend looking at on Google recommendations with someone that you trust, and then asking those same people that you spoke to on the phone if they can recommend you someone.
I love that. I love that. Okay. So now that we are talking about interviewing, I want to get into the processes, which includes the communication and the normal way that the tax preparer is going to communicate with their client. And I had seen, and you may have seen this or not, but like I said, SBDC client, tons of clients, you see a lot in a daily basis. I had somebody, and we're talking about a different scan of people, because I have some people that have very small companies, but they have a company and they're not using a software program, but they got detailed spreadsheets, which we'll talk about the difference between software and spreadsheets in a second, but they got detailed spreadsheets. Any tax preparer could look at those spreadsheets and they're better than some people's software that's not correct. So they're dead on, right? And then other people, of course, that have bookkeepers and software. Well, I had a couple people come back to me and said when they were getting ready to hire the tax preparer said that they must also do their bookkeeping and that they must have access to their bank account. So I started thinking, well, what's going on? You don't need that to do the tax preparer. Then as I found out, what they're doing is they're just basically setting up like a QuickBooks, downloading the information from their bank statements into the software and then putting it on their tax returns. In other words, automating it on their behalf to make it easy. But there's no questions. Well, is this deposit really revenue? Is there this? So where I'm going, I wanted to bring up that unique situation, but I think also in the interviewing, ask, what documents do you need from me? Do they have to be in accounting software? When do I go over things with you? What if I have a question outside of tax season and I'm just getting ready to, like one in our audiences, I'm just getting ready to buy some treasury bills mentioned, or I'm wanting to buy a car. Can I reach you outside of tax season? So there's a whole area around processes that the tax preparer uses to prepare the tax returns, documents, etc., and communication before, during, and after tax preparing season. So I'll let you take it from there on your thoughts and what you're seeing.
I love how we're talking about this. And then this is kind of an area where we kind of see this in a different perspective, right? Which I love. Okay. So what I am noticing is a trend of tax preparers now wanting to help clients who already have bookkeeping done. And when I say bookkeeping, they want from accounting software. So for the reason of that, and I come to understand why, it's because there's a lot of liability on the tax preparer side. Like, and I think more and more what's happening is that tax preparers are becoming a little bit anxious because of the amount of liability they have because they're licensed. That's an EA, a CPA, a tax preparer, or your regular tax preparer that just got licensed to be a tax preparer, like through H&R Block. They may not ask you for an accounting software. They may be just open, but as you get, the business world is a little bit different. So let's say you're a W-2 and then you are an independent contractor, like part-time. You may go into someone who became certified through H&R Block and they're okay accepting your Excel sheets. But the moment you become structured as a business owner, there's another level of liability because the tax preparer, the person who's doing your taxes, they have to make sure that all the information you're providing them is accurate, right? And I think a lot of people forget, because I encounter clients that like, they get frustrated with the tax preparer because they're like, why are they asking for all this stuff? And I say, it's because they have a liability aspect of it on their end. So when we transfer, but I get what you're saying. There are some tax preparers that just download everything and just categorize everything, where you don't want to come across that. If your tax preparer is not asking you, I love the fact that they are asking you to upload it to a QuickBooks software, right? Let's just use QuickBooks Online because it's my favorite. You have to make sure that that's tax preparer needs to ask you questions about certain expenses, about certain income. If they're not asking you nothing and then they just did the whole categorizing for you and they did the whole cleanup work without asking you and double checking certain transactions, then there's a problem with that. Secondary, I love also the aspect of using a QuickBooks software, and I understand why tax preparers want that. It's because they want to make sure you're reconciled. They want to make sure that everything is accurate according to your statements. Now, as far as access to the bank, I think there's a certain level of finding a different way for that. So most of my clients give me access, like, but my own personal access. Make sure that you're asking them for they're asking you for user access. That only gives us limited access just to download the statements and look at the transactions. Or the second thing you can tell them is, I can send over my statements for the whole year. That's what I can do in order for you to reconcile, right? So there's a lot of things that we are seeing in the world right now, but there's nothing wrong with an Excel sheet. But most likely someone who is going to be willing to take your Excel sheet, it's someone who is not dealing with a lot of business owners. And that's how you're able to discern if that person is used to dealing with business owners, I would say.
I love that. I love and there's three things, if I can remember all three that you said, that I really loved. And the one is, if your tax person is not asking you questions, don't be annoyed when they're asking questions. You really go, okay, this is great. The secondary thing is, you use the word reconciliation, and a lot of people don't realize tax returns have to reconcile from your internal reports to the bank statements. And that's one of the areas that a tax preparer can see something's not right, and they should come back and ask you questions on that as well. And you're correct that when we, and we're going to go into this next, there are times, and I'll give you my opinion, then yours as well, but you're correct that if you're into a certain number, I'm going to say transactions, it doesn't necessarily mean sales, because you could have one sale that's $1 million if you're selling homes, right? So it's more like the amount of transactions. If you suddenly are a corporation, you have a lot of transactions, and you're still trying to use an Excel document, no. But it's when you're really, really small, you can use a simple Excel document if you do not, this is my opinion, if you do not have a budget to hire an accountant or a bookkeeper to do your books, and you are not comfortable, nor do you have the time dedicated to sit down and properly learn how to use the accounting software. In my mind, at that stage of development, I'm not saying forever, but at that stage of development, why I like a spreadsheet or even a notebook pad is, I call it that it's static. They can look at the numbers and see them, and they can see accuracy and mistakes, versus if you put it in QuickBooks and they automate it in QuickBooks and they don't know how to read a balance sheet or a profit and loss, they don't know how to find their mistakes. And the other thing I do is, I tell them, update that spreadsheet, not based on receipts or transactions, but the bank statements themselves. Check off the bank statement, write something down, check off the bank statement. So it's really about, where are you now? And I'm going to end this before I pass it to you. The main goal from being an EA, so I speak IRS language, IRS doesn't care what you use. It has to be accurate. That's the key word. So if you're doing DIY and you're using QuickBooks and you aren't accurate, you're worse off than if you're using a notebook and you're accurate. So we got to go for accuracy. And I find that accuracy is a end product of being efficient at what you do, know what you're doing, and doing it consistently. Right. I'm going to pass it to you for your thoughts on that.
No, I love what you're saying, because it is important. Like, for example, I have clients that just started becoming independent contractors and sole proprietors, and I let them know the amount of transactions you have is very straightforward. On an Excel sheet, just keep track of the income coming in strictly from the independent contract work, and then keep track of the expenses that apply to the business, because they don't have so much work, right, to kind of transfer over to an accounting software. But in the same time, if you feel like you have that personality trait that can keep up with an Excel sheet, you're better off having someone help you with QuickBooks. And there's a lot of resources. I do agree, there are people, like, sometimes I'm on the phone with people and I love them so much and they're so ready to hire a bookkeeper, but I have to let them know, right now you're already functioning in the negatives. It's not worth for you to hire a bookkeeper yet. Now it sucks, because I know this is not your line of work, accounting and stuff, but you're probably going to have to just keep up with an Excel sheet or write it down on a journal. I have gotten so many clients that still do paper. I don't get it, but I'm very fortunate that I know how to read cursive, and I grew up in a generation where they taught us how to read cursive and all this thing. But pretty much, if you feel like you can't manage an Excel sheet, I recommend you to, yes, keep uploading your transactions to QuickBooks, but an Excel sheet is a perfect way to start because, for example, by tax season or halfway throughout the year, you'll see the total amount that you spent on gas. You'll see the total amount you spent on office supplies. And that will let you know as a business owner in a way, is this business even profitable? Like, so keeping up with any type of format, like a document, an Excel sheet, or QuickBooks, but with QuickBooks, please know that ideally it's really great to tie it in with a bookkeeper, or if you can find someone you can just hire for 1 hour and that hourly rate is really good, then I recommend that. Because I think what happens is people look at the rates online for a bookkeeper and they get so discouraged. You're like, oh, this is starting at $500 a month. And in reality, there are bookkeepers out there that can do your books for like, in 1 hour rate, or as low as $100 a month, or as low as $50, because it's only going to take them an hour to do the line of work that you have, the line of scope, right? The other thing I would say is, keep in mind that if you're going to do the Excel strategy, please keep up with it, because to do the cleanup work is going to overwhelm you and is going to make you not like it. I have a lot of clients that came to me with Excel sheets and they continue to do it for their peace of mind. And they send it to me, and then I make sure that their Excel sheet ties up to mine. And a lot of times I'm able to catch discrepancies. Like, for example, I'll tell them, hey, you forgot this expense on your spreadsheet, and then they'll upload it, and then our financial statements tie up, because you do want to have like a second eye to it, right? And then the third thing I want to let you guys know, that there's companies like my lawyers. I love my lawyers. They're making multi-million dollars. They have an Excel sheet. It's crazy. They have like my software, but then they send me their Excel sheet because the way they process things is like, Dalia, this is income. But then this right here is a loan to the client because I haven't got paid out from that case, right? So a spreadsheet is just perfect. I love spreadsheets.
Oh my God, you said so much. I'm like hoping my little brain will come back and be able to comment on them, because you said so much brilliant things. So I'm going to kind of go all over the place on this. So, and then I'll set you up with the next comment on this. I think what we're talking about too is having whatever a company needs for them to understand their numbers. Because if doing the spreadsheet helps them to understand their profitability and their numbers more than the QuickBooks, it's worth the time. And that's the goal, is that you have to understand the numbers. We got to come back and have a whole show just on that, but I had to mention it, understanding the numbers. But now I want to circle back, because you said so many things about having a second set of eyes, looking for discrepancies. And I want to go through the same kind of conversation we said about interviewing a tax preparer to a bookkeeper. And I'll tell you what I'm seeing. This is not something that makes me happy either. I have to say, this is like an issue I see. A lot of bookkeepers out there are simple, what I call technology people. They're not bookkeepers. All they're doing is pushing the button, lining up QuickBooks Online with the bank accounts, not checking anything. Things are wrong. They have ask your accountant on big numbers in that bucket. And so really the client could have done that, because they're not, they're just technology. They understand the technology. And unfortunately, those that came certified from QuickBooks are often the worst. They're not trained on bookkeeping at all. And I had a CPA say one time, I think it's the CPA, Michael, that you might have referred, that I had him on the show. Yes. He said the most brilliant thing. He said, automation needs supervision. So talk to us. I loved it. I loved it. I kept it. I have to have Michael back on the show now that I'm thinking.
Yes, please.
It's after tax extension season, because I know I have to have him back on. He was great. But talk to the audience about how to discern and understand whether your bookkeeper is literally just a technology person, which I think you know what I mean, pushing a button, where somebody's actually seeing your reports and checking the internal reports. Let's start out with that.
Okay, this is great, because we are seeing a handful of people promote themselves as bookkeepers, and it's completely okay. I guess I understand why, because the way they sold it, the way they set the flexibility and all these things. But at the same time, as business owners, we have to also be careful that there's a lot of newbies coming into this game, right? The bookkeeping game. Now, I highly recommend when you are talking to them, you're asking them how long you've been in the accounting industry, because that's number one. And then as far as not just accounting industries, because like we spoke before, there's many people who've been in the industry forever, right? Accounting industry, but they're only one-sided. They only know how to do accounting one way and not be flexible in different ways. Second thing I will ask them, how long have you been in business? That is a major thing. And trust me, I understand where bookkeepers who are starting off, they may feel like, well, that sucks. I haven't been in business a lot. I can't get a client, but we all been through that journey. Me and Lori had to earn people's trust. People, when I first launched my business, people had to trust that I knew what I was doing. Of course, I didn't get an overflow as I get today, right? But those people that trusted me eventually got me to where I am today. So I think that when it comes to business, yes, we do have to put in an amount of work to get people's trust. And what's going to earn that trust is our work. Our response. If your bookkeeper is not responding to you, if they're not, or if you have a call with them and they're not providing you so much juicy information, like for me, when I'm on the call, first, I do free consultation calls. At this point in my life, that's my way of giving, right? But I know this business owner, if they decide to work with me or not, they're going to leave with so much information that's going to help them kind of hire the next person. So just want to say that starting off, make sure that the person that you're on the phone with or considering hiring is providing you so much information to the point that it's like you feel like you paid for this service and it was so impactful, right? Then the other thing I would say is that it is correct. A lot of people, there are bookkeepers that they look at it like this is an easy task. You're just going to categorize, download the statements to the software and categorize. Keep in mind, we're dealing with a software. A software is not human. It doesn't think like a human all the time. Softwares are always updating. Make sure that you're dealing with a bookkeeper that is constantly in their learning stage. Like that's one thing I like pride myself with. I'm constantly learning when it comes to accounting, because as these softwares get bigger and more people come into it, there's constantly changes, right? It's not, when I look at bookkeeping, I don't look at it as just categorizing. I'm interviewing the client. What kind of transactions what do your expenses look like? Do you have cost of goods sold? Because a lot of times what I'm noticing, previous accountants will code certain things under supplies and material for the office, but in reality, that's cost of goods sold. That changes the profit and loss statement. Cost of goods sold has to be right underneath the income so you can know this is how much money I'm coming in, but this is how much I'm spending on the material. Now we work from there, right? Especially, you know what, Lori? It's a very delicate topic when we're talking about our product-based businesses. You cannot just hire someone who just became a bookkeeper. I'm sorry, but you're dealing with product-based. You're dealing with sales tax reporting quarterly. You're dealing with cost of goods sold. You're dealing with wholesale license. You're dealing with so much. Now, service-based business, I wouldn't mind you taking a chance on someone because I don't want to discourage bookkeepers who are coming into the field. But just make sure that if your bookkeeper is not asking you a set of questions and they're assuming that the expense was a business expense, and if that uncategorized expense category is so big, then that lets you know they don't have an idea of what kind of business expenses they have. Now, they may ask, if they do ask you, hey, I kind of feel like this expense was a personal expense, then that's a good bookkeeper right there for you because they're able to discern that.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. I love what you said. Now, so I had two thoughts to go back on, which tie in beautifully to what you were speaking of. So it's really about the person who doesn't have enough money to hire a bookkeeper, right? And in that, it's kind of being proactive and making sure at least what you're doing is accurate. But I also want to go into, it's not always easy to find, but there are people that you can get a consultation with. You can have them look at your financials to see if there's something potentially wrong on your balance sheet that you may not notice, that they can say, hey, go back and check. Because I know in my private company, I don't do it as much because I'm so busy, but I used to have where I had quarterly check-ins and people could hire me just for a couple hours. I would look at the end. I can't go back and look at all their accounting, right? But I can say, this on the balance sheet's not correct. I have a negative. Check into this. This isn't looking right. And I could look at the bookkeeper's work to kind of do a second set of eyes, or ask them, answer certain questions on tax deductions or something like that midstream. And I think, and you correct me if I'm saying something wrong, you also do a little bit of that, where if they can't hire you, you also will give an hour or so or something like that. I don't want to put any words in your mouth. So I just want to put on the table another option is, between the I don't have enough money to hire somebody and I'm completely doing it myself, there is the consultation consulting option for you. So chat about that for a little bit.
Yes, I absolutely offer that service. So I offer that service where like we meet 1 to 2 hours. We're on a Zoom call. If you want to share your screen, we're like diving into your books. Like for that hour or two, you feel like I'm your bookkeeper. Like I'm diving into your financial statements. I'm looking at the balance sheet. I'm looking if those numbers are accurate. Because I've been doing this so long, I can look at a balance sheet and no, it doesn't look right.
No, I mean, they
So
speak to me, the words go, hello, look over here.
right. Or then the other thing is like I'll dive into like how everything's categorized. I'll look at your financial statements and I'll look at certain things don't add up. This is too high. This is not really making sense to me. I'll look at the reconciliation. So in a way, it's either if you're the do-it-yourself person, then I'll see if you've been doing it accurately. And if you are not, within those 2 hours, I'm like in there working, getting it cleaned up for you. And my goal, just because like I really like to provide a lot of me when I'm on those calls. If I can get that cleaned up within those 2 hours, that's what I'm diving into. I'm going to get it cleaned up so you can prepare, you can be ready to prepare your taxes. But in the consultation call, what I see time and time again is I do have those clients that say, and I even tell them sometimes, I said, you cannot afford me right now, and it's okay. Just book me to meet up with me once a year. I have the other clients where they don't get their revenue, they don't get majority of their income until the end of the year. So a lot of them, they can't hire me on a monthly basis. So they have to hire me until the end to do a cleanup job. So I have a handful of people that just comes to me once a year and I'm just doing all 12 months all at once, right? And then I have the client that hires me consulting. Dalia, I've been working on this myself. This is what I have. How do you think this looks? And then they hire me once a year as well. Some have me quarterly just because they want me to make sure that their sales tax reporting is correct. Sometimes they have questions about the BOA or their LOC. So that makes them feel good. And it kind of makes them look forward to talking to me on a quarterly basis, because they're like, okay, all the questions I had within these months, I can just ask Dalia. And it's not just me answering your question, like I'm diving in with you, like I'm on the computer with you, which is kind of different than what these people are offering. What you do see sometimes is people charging you $250 for a consultation call, but all it is answering questions.
Yeah.
Where you want someone who can kind of feel like, hey, they're going to come in and kind of get me all cleaned up in a way. So that's the type of service I provide.
And that's a perfect understanding. And what it's doing is it's just giving our audience another way to think about it. You know, through the SBDC, being an advisor, and I've been with for a long time, I get to kind of look over people's shoulder and look at their numbers and see. But as the SBDC, we can't get engaged. We got to just be able to advise. So I can't come in and say, okay, and not that I run the software like you do, so I would know the best way to clean it up. I can tell you the problem. I don't always know how to clean it up because I don't use the software on a daily basis, which we're going to talk about software next. But I can say, hey, go back and look at this, go back and look at this. Sometimes it's just so wonderful to have a person look at something and have a second eye. Because I've been with the SBDC for a decade, I have some clients through the SBDC that will just every quarter send me some of their financials and we'll talk about profitability just as a check-in. So that's a beautiful example flexible on that. So before we go, because we're running out of time, I knew I got to have you back on. I want to not end without talking about software. Okay. So once again, I'm going to tell you my opinion on software, and the fine print on this is, guys, unlike you who are playing in the software all the time, I'm not. I'm looking at the CFO financials, so I'm not up to date on software. So what I'm about to say could be wrong. Like everything I say could be wrong, but I'll give you my opinion on it. And it comes from more my turnaround years with more type of customized software. So and because I'm old, I've been around a long time ago, right? So in the beginning, in my day, QuickBooks came out with QuickBooks Desktop, which is very much similar like a true accounting system. It really was more complicated and everybody couldn't use it all the time, right? Then
Right.
QuickBooks came out with QuickBooks Online, which of course I had a little bit of an attitude being a CFO. You know why? It was like a little toy piano, but I'm going to give them credit. They really do keep moving towards what I would call acceptable accounting. They can do a P&L, they can do a balance sheet. Banks are happy with it now as long as numbers are correct. You can get a loan on these type of documents. I'm happy with that. Then Xero, I use Xero now. I went from QuickBooks to Xero. Xero is a really robust accounting system, right? So I'm kind of happy with them. Okay, this is where, just my opinion, guys, and I could be wrong, and you correct me on this, okay? I have an issue with the other accounting systems like a FreshBooks and stuff like that, because although what I see them as, and like I said, you correct me, I see them as they're appealing, them and other ones, they're appealing to a client where they're saying, well, you could pay the invoice off of our software that sends out the invoice. You can actually keep your time if you're an independent consultant. So they're doing these different time management or payment management things, which are great. But the internal purpose of an accounting system is to have the robust accounting system to run a profit and loss, run a balance sheet. And so when they go to get a loan, they can't run these reports or they don't run them effectively. And really, you could get a time management software to do that. You could get a Square or something and use it to pay off. So I feel like what it's doing, and its claim to fame, and the small businesses are grabbing on it because they go, I don't understand the P&L and balance sheet, but I know I would love it if the clients could pay off of this invoice. And they say you're going to get paid quicker. So I feel like they're going after what the clients understand, but they're really not giving them what the clients need in a software. Lori's attitude, Lori's comment, could be wrong. You take it from there. Talk about any software you want. We even had somebody in the audience ask about software. So let's talk about software. Nancy,
Yay.
This is out to you as well.
Okay, I love this topic. I'm so happy you're bringing it up. So for me, I strongly agree with what you just said. This is how I look at the software industry. I tell everyone, there are people who are jack of all trades, but guess what? They're not fully devoting themselves to one of those trades. So they focus on the one that they're highly good at, right? So I tell people, like, my husband can pick up a sport and he'll be great, but trust me, he's better at one sport than the other, right? Now, the same thing with the accounting industry and the software industry. There are several software industries that provide accounting reporting, right? But there's always going to be the software that mainly puts all their emphasis, who know everything when it comes to that. When it comes to QuickBooks Online, I love it because they pride themselves for bookkeeping. When it comes to bookkeeping, you want to deal with a software that is so devoted to bookkeeping, right? And QuickBooks Online has taught themselves, I don't say QuickBooks Desktop just because eventually they're going to transition out of desktop. So I'm kind of getting everyone used to saying QuickBooks Online. And then it's what's happening is there's less people are taking on clients who are QuickBooks Desktop. So I want everyone to kind of get in the habit of hearing QuickBooks Online. Now, Xero, yes. Xero, I love that software as well, but Xero is the type of software I would recommend someone starting off, right? Someone who doesn't have many transactions, someone who can't hire a bookkeeper. We may disagree, but I look at it because it's more, it's a very fine-tuned, it's very easy, it's not too complicated, you can manage it yourself. But then I also recommend, if you do get confused, you can hire someone to help you manage it too. But eventually, as you bring in more money, you want to transition to something like QuickBooks because the reportings, there's so many reportings you can get from QuickBooks Online. You can do invoicing, you can just do so much there, and it's not too complex. Now, what I would say about QuickBooks, and the people at QuickBooks love me, trust me, they love me, but I'm always letting them know that I will continue my relationship with Gusto Payroll. So because Gusto mainly, their main focus is payroll. It's not bookkeeping. It's not nothing else. It's payroll and HR that come together, right? So with QuickBooks, I tell them, once you start adding all these revenues, I need you to be in that industry for many, many years so I can see, because I know their main focus is bookkeeping. So I know to a certain extent, their payroll is not where it needs to be because their main focus is somewhere else. And with Gusto, they have reasonable prices for your everyday person, no matter what level you are in the business. They have great HR services. But when using these softwares, I don't know if you agree, Lori, but I recommend you to get an invitation for someone who is a pro advisor in those softwares. Like, for example, I'm pretty sure you're certified. I'm certified through QuickBooks, Gusto, Xero. So when I invite you, even if you don't decide to be our clients, you get a tremendous discount on that software because an accountant invited you. So take advantage of all these resources, right? And make sure that when you're starting off these softwares, I want you starting off in the most simplest level. Always start, like for QuickBooks, it's called QuickBooks Simple Start. Don't even do self-employed, because that right there itself, it's horrible. You don't even you can't even reconcile, and you can't even get the reportings you want. So I hope this helped.
That totally helped. And see, one of the things that I think that is the takeaway too, is we're both agreeing is look at what the main focus of the software is. And, with Xero, I first was testing it. I got to say, I just have to come back on this. QuickBooks, and this is me being an attitude. QuickBooks pissed me off with all their marketing. Every time I would launch it, I would have marketing and, yes, what about the payroll and stuff? So I looked in Xero, and they have a administrator one that's more of a complicated software program. And that's the one I use, but it's got the old tradition numbering of accounts and everything like that. But you're far more knowledgeable, because I don't do bookkeeping for people. I only have my own QuickBooks and Xero for my accounts and been in it. So you know more exactly what you're talking about. But I think the wonderful takeaway is when any company starts adding more revenue, payroll with QuickBooks, I agree, that's kind of a nightmare. I've seen people get in trouble with that, and it's not their discipline, and it's a subject matter that needs to have discipline, legal, finance, and tax. You have to start questioning. Go with the company that knows what they're doing and does it on a consistent basis for your comfort. I always say, the more I don't know, the more I need to make sure who I hire or use knows.
Yes. Lori, I want to say real quick too, that make sure that the software you're deciding to enroll yourself in has great customer support.
Yes.
Because your FreshBooks is not going to offer you that. QuickBooks Online, one thing, I may call them and ask for support, and they may not know the answer, but I end up answering my own question when I call them all the time. But they know a handful of information as well, compared to other softwares where you can't even reach out to a customer, like a contact, like, a customer support rep. And then secondary, when it comes to payroll, definitely involve someone else, because there's a lot of HR, workers' comp. In the state of California, they just passed this law where even if you're part-time, as the employer, you have to offer your part-time employees a retirement plan. It's up to them to click yes or no. If they don't click no, then automatically you have to start deducting a certain percentage going towards their retirement plan through the website CalSavers. So there's a lot. A lot of people think that payroll is just very straightforward, and it's not. It's so much.
You know what?
Tedious.
We got to have you back on again just to pick up from there because we're over time and I'm still chatting. But yeah, I've seen, and payroll gets to be a civil liability if you do it wrong. I'll end on that. So we're got to have you back on. So first of all, I want to thank you so much because guys in the audience, if you haven't noticed, we had what could be considered a very controversial show, right? We talked about the things they don't talk about in public, right? Well, what's going on in the industry, what software is good, what software is not, how to get a good bookkeeping when they're no good. I mean, we had the discussion that you guys needed to hear that people don't talk about, and that's the vape. And I knew, I was like, who's can come on my show and have a discussion on things people don't talk about and be well informed, because you're seeing it. You see it more than I do on a daily basis. So thank you for your honesty, your ethics, for sharing your information. Sadie made sure your information is in the chat. Please reach out to Dalia. You got a question, you want to get a consultation. I don't have too many people that I really support and say they know their stuff, but you know your stuff, and you have a whole team behind you as well. So you can take on many more clients. So with that, Sadie, I ran over. It was just such a hot topic. We could have went on forever, right? But Sadie, let's.
Well, I was a viewer. I was literally a viewer, and I was like, oh my God, the cow savers. I mean, honestly, I'm going to put it in there. I think we need to have a webinar about that because I haven't clicked on that button. And then right when you said that, I was like, is that what happened? I'm like, oh my goodness.
Yes, yes. In fact, that is a new, and we need to address that because I have not talked about that on the show. Even when Zimara was on, there was so much to talk about with everything else. We haven't talked about. Okay, Cal Savers, I see Lamar, Cal Savers. Okay, we're going to have Cal Savers discussion. Like the show that keeps going. And one last thing to Naz, if I'm pronouncing your name right, Sadie will put my contact information in the chat. Just send me an email and we'll get you a one-on-one to have a meeting through the SBDC. So I wanted to catch up on that. Okay, guys, we'll be here all day if I don't end the show. Oh my God. Dalia, as always, thank you so much for coming on. I greatly appreciate. To you guys, Sadie is staying behind us. She always does. She will take your emails. She'll give you Dalia's contact information if you don't have it. My information, anything you need to know, she'll clean it up. Dalia and I are out of here. So I want to thank you. If you've been new to the show, it's a great show. Make sure you tune in every week, or you can watch the past shows on YouTube. Sadie will make sure you get the link for all the past shows. Till then, frequent flyers that are here with me every week, thank you so much. To those new, I look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you for watching another great Small Biz Talk with your host, Lori Williams. See everybody next week. Bye.
Bye.